This is the Think Again podcast.
I'm Scott Jentz, your host, and today's episode is titled Optical Efficiency You Need to Consider. Our guest is Carissa Dunphy, marketing specialist for PECA and also American Board of Optician Recertified. She's the founder and editor-in-chief of Optician Now and currently is vice chair for the Communications and Website Committee of the Optical Women's Association. She's also co-host of the OWA podcast, OWA Talks. Carissa, welcome to the Think Again podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here to talk about the thinking again perspective.
All right. Well, the podcast host becomes the guest. We're going to turn it around on you here. When you make an assessment of an optical dispensary within an eye care business, what's the most common failure you see at first glance?
I think the first thing is redundant tasks. So many times we are in the habit of doing things the same thing, the same way when this eats 45 seconds, this eats 1 minute, and then you multiply that by however many patients per day, however many staff members per day, and then you're netting 2 wasted hours a week between your staff when that could much better be used doing something else or catching up on other things.
So what's at the core of those redundant tasks? I wonder if sometimes it's not the very software we use or it's some other tool that we start working around. What causes it?
A lot of them are software. I think a lot of practices aren't fully aware of how robust what they already use is. And that can be solved with, a quick walkthrough with whoever handles the software, their 800 number, their virtual demo, whatnot, because they're always doing updates and adding new features. So you may not even know that this exists because you've just been using it the same way you have since day one. And they may have added something really cool that may save you this much time here and this much time there, or that one thing that's been so tedious and driving you crazy. They finally addressed it because they listened and they're now implementing it. And I know a lot of platforms too have beta versions where you can get in and test something before it's public. And that's a good way to get ahead of the curve too, because most of the beta versions, they're good, they're solid, they're just a select user group. So I would definitely recommend getting maybe a touch base or a refresh with whatever software you're using, whether that's the patient's where you keep the records or whether it's the communication. If you have a separate communication, like where you're texting patients or notifying them about orders or really anything, your reps, the way that you order, that could save time too. So there's always new things that are out there. You just got to be open to listening to them and trying what might work for you. Don't say no just because it's going to take an extra 5 minutes to set it up, because that will save you so much time in the long run.
And that gets me to think about you categorizing inefficiency in seconds and minutes. That really counts when you're talking about efficiency. It is the case then that you're saying that tasks can sort of add up over the course of a day and create, at the end of the day, lost opportunity. Is that how you look at it, literally in seconds spent?
Absolutely. I know as an optician working in clinic, you have 4.8 seconds before that doctor walks around the corner with the patient. You don't get to say, oh, hold on, patient, let me finish typing this, or let me hang up this phone call. You go, like there is no time. You go right then. And it's the same, like you never know when the next patient's going to pop out or who may be available to help you or who may not be. So those seconds truly do add up and net a big total if you look at it that way in the end.
That's interesting. Task switching really creates ineffectiveness and inefficiency, doesn't it?
For sure. I mean, they say when you get distracted, let's say by your phone, not in the case of clinic, right? Because we don't use our phones in the clinic. But let's say you get a text from a patient and you're typing in an order, the time you take to respond to that patient and then just get your thoughts back on track to finish that order. It does take time to recover from those distractions. And it's the same as, when you're going to work with a patient and you're coming back to your desk, you're like, oh, now I don't remember what I was doing. And then someone answered my phone. So now my papers are moved. And, it's just one of those things that we know in clinic you have to keep going, and those seconds and minutes are crucial, not in a, super important way, but wanting to be efficient and get your tasks done so you can leave on time and get your patient orders done so that your patient satisfaction rate is up, and um, the patients aren't going to stop coming out. The doctor's going to bring you a new one. Your schedule's full. You don't get to just pick and choose what and when.
That's interesting. So the efficiencies that a practice builds in through its systems are often taught to people as they come into the job. How do you advise those that are in a dispensary to deal with opportunities in improving efficiency that go against the natural protocols that are there? I mean, should a listener who's got a great idea but is being told by a leader to sort of pipe down and just do the work the way we always do it, should they speak up? How much of an impact is that on inefficiency?
Well, I'm a big proponent for transparency, and if you understand the whole picture, then I can do my job better. For example, when I started in clinic, I started at the front desk, and then I wanted more hours. I needed to learn how to tech, and then I was bored, so I needed to become an optician. I couldn't have been as good of an optician, as efficient as I was, if I had not been a tech and knew where to find and enter the auto-refraction and the K readings to pull the contacts or whatever, because I had entered that. And I wouldn't know how to decipher the insurance as well as I do if I hadn't been at the front desk calling the insurance companies from the beginning. Um, and it's those little things. So like as an optician, I was able to help the techs because I was there. I was able to help them with, the auto lensometer isn't auto importing into the software. It's that button's not working. Well, I never knew there was a button that even did that because it never worked. So it's like, okay, well, let's take the time to relink it. Oh, now you're saving 10 minutes a week because of a feature you never knew existed. Um, so that's kind of an example of, if you know the full circle or all of the options, you might be like, this will help Sue, but this will help Betty in different ways because everybody thinks differently and does stuff differently.
So earlier you answered for me what the number one issues you see is, sort of redundancies. What are the most common efficiencies, or what's the most common efficiency aside from that you usually recommend to a practice to implement?
I think a big one that I've seen in different practices, one practice where it was poorly done and one practice where it was done well, is bulking things together. For example, frame ordering. One practice I worked at ordered one frame at a time whenever it came up, not the most efficient use of time. Where another practice put them in a pile and ordered them on Tuesday and on Friday. Number one, it saves time for multiple people, but number two, it saves on shipping because you're combining things, and you're not going to add a ton of time to the order by waiting 1 or 2 days. It's not detrimental to order it the exact same day, and a lot of times you miss the shipping cutoff. I'm in Pacific time, so I would always miss the shipping cutoff anyways. um, so it doesn't hurt. It's not going to kill the order to wait a day or two. But yeah, bulking stuff together and seeing where you can maybe combine efforts instead of doing one off after one off after one off.
And that's a nice systematic recommendation, right? Systematically, they take an approach to maybe bulking or batching other things like putting in managed vision care plan orders or something like that. Or are there other examples of that you could offer?
Yeah, well, we had a couple accounts with tons of frames, and those frames came with multiple reps. So instead of meeting with 3 reps from one company, I would be like, can you guys would help me so much if you could just come on the same day at the same time and do it that way. And sometimes that works. But if it doesn't, you can always work around it with, let me email you my inventory and you can tell me what to pull, or things like that. So there's different ways around everything, but combining reps was a big help. It's hard to get away from reps because they're fun and you see someone that you like and they're outside of your your normal everyday thing, and reps are always, bringing new information, and of course frames that everybody wants to buy. So that's just one example, but it did help a lot.
So let me ask the question I got to guess people are thinking, and that is the reps often like their sort of time at the window with you to talk and maybe, get a little chummy. Were they not reluctant to come all at the same time to lose maybe a little bit of that one on one time?
Well, for me, I'm a spreadsheet and numbers person, and I know how many frames I need to order before the rep comes. So I need to do my job and get back so my coworkers don't drown on the floor. Um, but if a rep wants your business, they will do whatever they need to help you and your practice. And I'm not saying, they need to come at weird hours or anything like unreasonable. Um, but reps are genuinely your partners and they want your practice to succeed. So if it's easier for them to do this than that, then they'll try to accommodate you. I would be surprised if a rep wouldn't. I've had reps offer to do incredible things. Um, you know, in December when you can't see any reps because you're slammed. I had reps, they're like, I'm just going to come in. Like, you don't have to buy anything. I'm just going to come in and clean up for you. That's all I'm going to do. Just little things like that. Reps are your best friend and your practice allies. And that's not just frame reps. It's contact lens reps and instruments and of course drug reps too. But utilize them and ask them how they would recommend to improve things for your practice, because they've seen everything and done everything out in the world and you haven't, because you've only seen it your way.
What about on the lens side? Where do we get efficiency on the lens side, right? There's a lot of measuring time and other things that go into it, conversations about different products. Any thoughts there?
I love the lens side because I'm a huge, just I geek out about new lenses when they come out. um, so lenses is tricky because opticians are type A and they want to sell the lenses that they want to sell. And that should be fine, right? Some practices you can order whatever you want, some you can't because of who you're owned to by, or if your owner just prefers something. But in the end, whatever you do, your practice will be better off if you use lens families. One, because you can get better rebates and better savings from volume. Um, but it's easier to train staff and be cohesive. You don't want Janet to come in and get this optician and they have this progressive, and then she gets a different optician and she gets a different progressive. That's not in the patient's best interest. Not that I'm saying one lens can serve any purpose or all purposes for every patient, but um, knowing what's available in the families and trying to stick with that is a good way to streamline things. And then the reps can come in and teach your staff about the products, and you'll have a better understanding of what a fixed corridor is, or what a variable corridor is, or an occupational, and just everything that they offer, because most lens families offer everything that you need within that family. They really do. But like you said, with that comes measuring. I'm a big advocate for measuring with digital measuring devices. I do have a CE that I recently gave on it. A lot of people are reluctant to use digital devices because, oh, they're not accurate, or they're not this, I can't trust it, blah, blah, blah. My favorite example is from Dr. Schneider when the autorefractor came into practices. How did those ODs adapt to that? They were hesitant, they were reluctant, they didn't want it. And now look at where it's at. It is in every single practice. So with digital measuring devices, there's one that's going to fit your practice better, whether you can move around with it, where it's stationary, whether it transfers to EHR, whether it doesn't, whether it saves it. But now with everyone going to electronic medical records, you can put that in for later. Like if you're like, oh, this measurement's way off. How many times have I been able to pull up that picture and look at the photo and go, oh, well, that's because he's sitting with his neck all funny. That makes sense. Okay, that's why the measurement is way off. Well, if you hadn't used a digital measuring device, you'd have no way to go back and reference that except maybe fudge the number or call the patient back. So it has a ton of benefits too. efficiency being
That's
a good
great.
one.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to think about how we measure efficiency. We talked earlier about seconds count, but I'm thinking about it on a broader, more global level. Like, what's the main indicator that helps us understand we're going to improve our efficiency from baseline where we are today to tomorrow? Is it how long it takes the patient to get their eyewear from the day they sit down to the day it's delivered to them? Is there something else that you think of as a good indicator and measuring system for efficiency?
I think it could be different for every practice, because of their labs and because of maybe geography and how long it takes frames to get there, or any of those factors. Um, that's kind of tough, but I think it's a lot of it right now is everyone's short staffed, and where can they save the most time, or where are they needing the most help? It might be that the front desk needs more help than optical, and that's jamming up
Right.
optical because optical is now checking their own insurance because, it might be some just weird log jam that's all out of whack. So it's really hard to say specifically, but I think
That's a good point.
identifying where the problem is and what it is, or maybe where it's starting, find the root cause, because it may look like it's over here, but in really it's 9 steps before that that's causing the two problem. So for each practice, I would say just find where it is and what the root cause is for maybe beginning that inefficiency.
That's a really good point. I appreciate you making it because I think of it in a sort of patient first approach, but that also means there might be some real issue in the back office with handoff with techs, or, to your point, understaffing may have caused some other issue. And for now, even within this practice, it may be a different measurement for the next 4 months than it is the next 6 months after that, because what we're really trying
Right.
to do is alleviate one issue, creating efficiencies that get better throughput that will ultimately lead to patients getting their eyewear in a more timely manner or whatever. I'm really glad you said it that way.
Yeah, and that's not to say that it can't change or that it won't go back to how it was a year ago because of staff shifts. But hopefully being able to see it from that perspective can help you identify things sooner in the future.
Yep. All right. Well, you get the last word. What else do you want to tell us about efficiency that can help our listeners improve?
I would just say that the time that it will take you to identify it and come up with a solution is well worth the time investment up front. It'll save you way more time in the long run.
And you're telling us to actually sit down and do work on it. It doesn't always mean hiring a consultant, but grabbing the necessary stakeholders in the business and having specific business time to look at areas where efficiency can be gained, even if they don't feel inefficient.
Yeah, and sometimes it may not be a true inefficiency. It may be a task that someone hates to do so much that they put it off and put it off, and then it ends up not getting done. So maybe, talk to each staff member or have them anonymously put in what is the thing that takes you the longest to get done, because it may not be actually inefficient, and maybe procrastination. You never know. But ask each person, where do you need to save time? And then whatever your fix is, it may solve three people's problem instead of just one, because you never knew that your software program did that new feature.
That's a great point. Carissa Dunphy, thank you for being the guest on today's Think Again podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's it for today's Think Again podcast, brought to you by GPN Visions, a peer to peer learning community to help grow your eye care business.